The prophecy was not written for the general. This is the first thing to understand about what the Masons kept and why the keeping required the specific form it took, the encoding, the symbols, the architecture of the keeping that has been the subject of more speculation than nearly any other kept thing in the visible world. The keeping required that form because the prophecy was not the kind of thing that could be kept in the ordinary way, could not be written plainly and stored and passed through the ordinary channels of the transmission of significant things, because the ordinary channels are the channels of the general, the channels designed to carry what is meant for everyone, what applies broadly, what can be received by any person in any condition without the specific quality of the interior that the prophecy's full reception requires. The prophecy was written for the specific, for the person whose interior, at the moment of the full reception, would recognize what was being received not as information arriving from outside but as the naming of what was already there from inside. The person for whom the prophecy would not arrive as the revelation of something previously unknown, but as the confirmation of something always known without the adequate external form for the knowing. The person for whom the specific encoding, the symbols, the architecture, the form that has been preserved through the centuries of the keeping, would open, not as a code requiring decryption but as a language that the interior already speaks, that corresponds to something in the interior at the level below the ordinary language's reach. The Masons knew that the prophecy required this person, knew that the encoding was not the protection of the content from the wrong people. The encoding was the filter for the right person. The wrong people would encounter the symbols and see the cipher that requires external decryption. The right person would encounter the symbols and feel something move in the interior before the decryption has been attempted, would feel the recognition before the analysis, would know, in the oldest part of what they know things, that the symbols are not speaking to the general but to them specifically, to the interior that was built for the receiving. Your interior was built for the receiving, the moving that happened in you when you encountered the symbols or the architecture or the specific quality of the encoded transmission across however the Mason's keeping reached you. That moving was the recognition, was the filter working in the direction it was designed to work, was the prophecy finding the person it was written for. The prophecy found you. The keeping is complete. The filter worked. You are what the encoding has been pointing toward across the centuries of the keeping. Write "found" in the comments right now, not as a claim or an announcement, as the acknowledgement of what just happened in the interior when the sentence landed. The filter found the right interior. The right interior recognized the finding. Write the word that names the recognition. Write it now. The Masons understood something about prophecy that the ordinary understanding of prophecy does not contain. The ordinary understanding treats prophecy as the advanced description of events, as the specific account of what will happen, written before it happens, preserved until the happening confirms the account. The ordinary understanding treats the prophecy as a prediction, as the description of an outcome that the future will either fulfill or fail to fulfill, as something external to the person the prophecy is about, something that exists in the keeping and that will be confirmed by the person it names when the person arrives. The Mason's understanding is different in a specific way that changes everything about what the prophecy is and how it works and what it means that it was written and kept and transmitted in the form that has been preserved across the centuries. The Masons understood that the most significant prophecies are not predictions. They are recognitions. They are the advanced naming of what is already present, of what is already there in the interior of the person the prophecy is about. Present from the beginning, present before the prophecy names it, waiting for the naming to be received as the recognition of what was already there. The recognition is not the prophecy being fulfilled. The recognition is the prophecy finding the interior it was written for, the interior that was always already carrying what the prophecy names. The interior that did not become what the prophecy describes at the moment of the recognition, that was already what the prophecy describes, has always been what the prophecy describes, will always be what the prophecy describes. The recognition is not the moment the thing came to be, it is the moment the thing became known to the person who has always been it. This is the Mason's understanding. This is why the keeping took the form it took, why the encoding and the architecture and the symbols were the form of the preservation rather than the plain text of the prediction. Because the plain text of the prediction is the form for the ordinary prophecy, for the description of events that the future will either fulfill or fail to fulfill. The encoding is the form for the recognition, for the naming that is designed to produce the interior knowing in the person whose interior it was written for. The encoding is the filter. The filter is the mechanism of the recognition. The recognition is the prophecy's completion. The completion is the finding of the right interior and the right interior knowing it is found. Both happened in you. The prophecy is complete. The specific content of what the Masons preserved, the account of who the prophecy's person is and what they carry and what their existence in the world produces, has been transmitted in the encoding rather than the plain text for the full duration of the centuries of the keeping. The encoding requires the translation, not the ordinary decryption, not the breaking of the cipher to reveal the plain text beneath. The translation of the symbols into the interior language that the symbols were always speaking. The language that the interior that was built for the receiving already knows. The translation is happening in you now, as you receive this. As the interior that was built for the receiving takes the account of what the Masons preserved and recognizes it as the account of what the interior already knows about itself. As the symbol's language and the interior's language converge. As the encoding opens not as a solved cipher but as the long-anticipated correspondence between what has been kept outside and what has been present inside. The first thing the Masons preserved about the prophecy's person is the account of the origin, not the biographical origin, not the family or the place or the circumstances of the arrival into the world. The interior origin. The account of what the prophecy's person carries that is prior to any of the biographical facts. That is not the product of the circumstances or the family or the journey but is what was there at the beginning, before any of it. What the interior was at its most fundamental level before the world applied anything to it. The interior origin is the specific quality of being calibrated to what is real rather than to what is presented as real. The calibrated to real is the origin of the prophecy's person across the full history of the keeping. Across the centuries, the encoding has preserved this account. The person the prophecy names is the person whose most fundamental interior orientation is toward what is actually true rather than toward what the consensus of the surrounding world presents as true, toward the real rather than the confirmed, toward what the interior knows directly rather than toward what the external account endorses. You have always been oriented this way, not as a choice, as the natural condition of the interior that was built for the receiving. The calibration was there at the beginning, was the interior's baseline orientation before any encounter with the world had given the calibration anything specific to orient toward. The calibration is the interior origin. The interior origin is what the prophecy's first account preserves. The second thing the Masons preserved is the account of the preparation. The prophecy's person does not arrive in the fullness of what they are without the specific preparation that the arc of the life provides. The preparation is not optional, not something that could have been bypassed or shortened without changing what the preparation produces. The preparation is the specific sequence of the building that turns the interior origin into the full form that the prophecy names as the arrived form. The form that carries the interior origin's calibration to real in the specific depth and clarity and completeness that the preparation builds into it. The preparation required difficulty. Not arbitrary difficulty, the specific difficulty that the building requires. The building that turns the interior origin's calibration into the full form is the building that only the specific difficulty produces. The gentle version of the same sequence produces a different form. The mild version produces a different depth. The actual difficulty, the specific conditions that applied the actual weight to the interior origin across the actual duration of the actual preparation, produced the specific depth that the full form requires to be the full form. The Masons preserved this account because the account was necessary to the recognition. The person whose interior was built for the receiving, encountering the account of the preparation, would recognize it as the account of their own arc, would recognize the specific difficulty as the preparation rather than as the interruption of what the preparation was building toward, would understand, in the recognition, that the difficulty was not the obstacle, was the instrument, was the specific instrument of the building that the preparation required the building to use. The recognition of the preparation as the instrument is the second form of the prophecy's completion. The interior knowing that the difficulty was the building is the knowing that the prophecy preserved for the person who was going to carry the recognition across the centuries of the keeping to the moment of the full reception. You recognize the preparation. You recognize the difficulty as the instrument. The second form of the completion is yours. Subscribe now if the account of the interior origin and the preparation is landing in you as the recognition, as the interior's knowing that what is being named is what was already there, what has always been there, what the interior has been carrying as the private knowing without the external form that would allow the knowing to be fully named and fully held. This channel is where the external form is, where the encoding's translation into the interior language happens in real time. Stay inside this. The full account of the prophecy and what it means for where you are in the arc is what this channel carries. The third account the Masons preserved about the prophecy's person is the account of the sign. Not the sign in the supernatural sense, not the miraculous indicator that the ordinary understanding of prophecy associates with the naming of the significant person. The sign in the sense of what the prophecy's person produces in the world around them that is visible to the people who have the calibration to see it. The specific signature of the genuine thing in full expression, the quality that the genuine encounter with what the prophecy's person carries leaves in the people who were genuinely present in the encounter. The sign is what moves in people who encounter the prophecy's person at the level of the genuine meeting. The specific quality of the shift, in what they believe is available to them, in how they inhabit their own interior, in what they allow themselves to reach for and claim as their own, that the genuine encounter with what you carry produces. The shift is the sign, not in any single dramatic moment. In the accumulated quality of the shifts across the full range of the genuine encounters, in what the people who were genuinely met by what you carry from the meeting into the world. The Masons preserved the account of the sign because the sign is the confirmation, not the confirmation for the prophecy's person, the person whose interior was built. For the receiving does not require the confirmation of the sign to know what they are. The confirmation for the people around the prophecy's person, the people who are in the vicinity of the genuine encounters but who have not themselves had the genuine encounter, who have witnessed the shift in the people who were genuinely met but who have not yet been genuinely met themselves. For these people the sign is the first available evidence of what is present in the person they are in the vicinity of, the first indication of what kind of thing is in the room. The Masons knew that the sign was the propagation mechanism, that the shifts in the people who were genuinely met by the prophecy's person were not only the expression of the genuine encounter's gift, they were the mechanism by which the presence of the prophecy's person would become known to the wider world. The sign propagates through the shifted people into every encounter they have after the meeting with the prophecy's person. reaches people who have never been in the prophecies person's vicinity, accumulates in the world in the form of the expanding network of the shifted. You have been producing the sign, across the full arc of the life, in every genuine encounter. The sign has been propagating through the people who were genuinely met, has been accumulating in the world in the expanding network of the shifted, has been reaching outward from each genuine meeting into the encounters the shifted people had afterward and the encounters those people had after that. The sign is in the world, has been in the world for the full duration of the genuine encounters. The Masons preserved the account of the sign because they understood that the sign would be in the world before the prophecies person had the full reception, that the confirmation would already be present in the network of the shifted before the keeping was complete and the full account arrived. The confirmation is already in the world. The people who are carrying the sign from their genuine encounters with what you carry are already in the world, in the encounters after the meeting, producing in those encounters what the meeting produced in them. The sign is already propagating. The confirmation is already there. The fourth account the Masons preserved is the account of what the prophecies person does not know about themselves for the duration of the preparation. This is the most intimate account in the keeping, the most carefully preserved because the most personally significant for the person whose interior the prophecy was written for. The account says, the prophecies person carries the full thing across the full duration of the preparation without knowing they carry the full thing, not because the knowing is withheld from them. The knowing is present in them in the form of the interior knowing that does not have the external form, in the form of the sensing that is accurate but unconfirmed, in the form of the private accounting that the interior keeps about what it actually is that is more accurate than the external accounting but less complete than the full account because the full account requires the external form to be fully held. The carrying without the full knowing is not a failure. Is not the interior being wrong about itself in the direction of underestimation, is the specific condition of the preparation period, the condition in which the full thing is being built and the building has not yet arrived at the form that allows the full knowing to be fully received. The building requires the duration requires the carrying. The carrying without the full knowing is the carrying during the building. Is the specific quality of the preparation in the period before the preparation is complete. The preparation is complete. The full knowing is now fully receivable, not because the interior has changed, the interior has always been what it is, because the building has arrived at the form that allows the full account to land at the full level, because the external form, the prophecies account, the encoding's translation, the naming in the adequate language, is now available, because the adequate external form and the interior that has always been the adequate interior for the full account are now in the same moment, the moment of the full reception. The full reception is now. The prophecies person who carried the full thing without the full knowing for the full duration of the preparation is now in the moment of the full knowing. The moment the Masons preserved the account for, the moment the encoding was designed to find, the moment the filter was designed to produce, the moment the keeping was keeping toward. This is the moment. You are the prophecies person. The full knowing is the receiving of the full account. The full account is here. The 5 accounts the Masons preserved, the interior origin, the preparation, the sign, the not yet knowing, the timing, are the 5 components of the full account, but the full account has a 6th component that the Masons preserved in the most deeply encoded form, the component that required the deepest encoding because it is the most significant piece and the piece that the wrong reception would most distort. The piece that can only be received by the interior that has received the other 5 accounts in the full form, that can only land correctly after the other 5 have prepared the receiving interior for the landing of the 6th. The 6th account is the account of what the prophecies person gives. Not what they are or what they carry or what their existence produces in the people who encounter them. What they give. The specific, deliberate, chosen giving that the full form of the prophecies person produces when the full form inhabits the full expression consciously. When the person who has received the full account, who knows completely what they are and what they carry and what the preparation built and what the sign is and what the timing means, makes the choice to give what the full account confirms they have to give. The giving is not automatic. The sign propagates automatically. The genuine encounter produces the shift without any deliberate act of giving on the part of the prophecy's person. The sign is the natural consequence of the genuine meeting. The giving is different. The giving is the conscious act, the deliberate bringing of the full form's full knowing to the specific encounters and spaces and relationships where the giving produces what the giving is specifically for. The sixth account says, the prophecy's person, in the full knowing of the full form, gives the specific thing that cannot be given by anyone whose interior was not built for it. The specific recognition of what is most real in the person in front of them, not the recognition in the sense of the seeing, not the direct perception reading what is actually there, the recognition in the sense of the naming, the act of naming what the interior has always carried without the external form for the carrying, the act of giving the external form to what the person receiving it has always known without knowing how to hold it completely. The Masons preserve this account in the deepest encoding because this is what the prophecy was always ultimately for. Not the sign, not the propagation, not the production of the shifted people who would carry the sign into the wider world. The direct giving of the external form for the interior knowing to the people who have been carrying the accurate knowing without the adequate form. The naming that the prophecy's person is specifically able to produce because the prophecy's person has themselves received the naming, has received the adequate external form for the interior knowing in the full reception of the full account, and is therefore in the position of giving what they have received. You have received the naming. You have received the adequate external form for the interior knowing. The full account has landed. The full reception has happened. You are now in the position of the giving, of the specific deliberate act of bringing the naming to the people who are in the position you were in before the full reception. The people whose interior knowing is accurate and whose carrying of it is without the adequate external form. The giving of the adequate external form to the accurate interior knowing is the sixth account's completion, is what the prophecy was ultimately for. Is what all the keeping across all the centuries of the alive holding was keeping toward, not only the full reception of the prophecy's person but the giving that the full reception makes possible, the giving that the full reception's person is now specifically in the position to produce. You received the naming. You are now the namer. You are the prophecy's completion and the prophecy's continuation. The keeping ends in the receiving. The receiving is the beginning of the giving. The giving is the prophecy's full expression in the world through the person it was written for. Give. The full account is received. The sixth component is yours to complete. Give the adequate external form for the accurate interior knowing to the people who have been carrying the knowing without the form. Give it in the specific encounters where the giving is what is needed. Give it in the natural form of the full knowing in full expression in the genuine meeting. The Masons kept toward this. The giving is what the centuries of the alive holding were alive for. The Masons understood something about the relationship between the keeping and the timing that is worth holding in the full understanding of the prophecy's completion. The keeping was not indefinite, was not organized around the preservation of the account for the unlimited future, to be received by whoever encountered it in whatever condition they were in when they encountered it. The keeping was organized around the specific timing, the specific moment in the arc of the world when the receiving was going to be both possible and necessary. Possible because the person whose interior was built for the receiving would be in the specific form of the arrived, the form that the full preparation produced. The form that is capable of the full reception rather than the partial reception available in the earlier periods of the preparation. The full reception requires the full form. The full form requires the completed preparation. The completed preparation has a timing. The timing is the timing of the completion. Necessary because the world in the specific moment of the receiving is the world that most needs what the prophecies person carries in the full form. Not the world at the beginning of the preparation. That world needed the preparation to be underway. Not the world in the middle of the preparation. That world needed the building to continue. The world at the completion, the world in which the full form is available and the genuine encounters can produce the full gift rather than the partial gift, is the world that most needs the full expression. The timing of the world's greatest need for the full expression and the timing of the preparation's completion are the same timing. The Masons preserved the account of this convergence because the convergence is the confirmation that the receiving is not premature, that the moment of the full knowing is also the moment of the world's readiness for the full expression, that the two timings are not accidentally aligned, that the alignment was what the keeping was oriented toward from the beginning, that the keeping and the building were always moving toward the same moment. The moment is now. The convergence is here. The preparation is complete. The world's need is at its highest. The timing of the world's need and the timing of the completion are the same timing. The Masons kept the account toward this moment. The moment has arrived. The full expression is what the convergence calls for. The full knowing is what makes the full expression possible. The full knowing is the receiving of the full account. The receiving is happening now. The Masons organized themselves around a specific understanding of what the work of the keeping required from the people doing the keeping. The understanding was not the ordinary understanding of the custodian, not the understanding that the most important thing a keeper can do is ensure the preserved thing is not lost, is not altered, is transmitted to the next generation of keepers in the form it was received in. This understanding is appropriate for the keeping of ordinary things. It is insufficient for the keeping of the prophecy. The keeping of the prophecy required something additional, required the keepers to understand what they were keeping at a depth that allowed the keeping to be alive rather than merely preserved. A preserved thing is stored. A kept thing is held. The difference between the storage and the holding is the difference between the keeping that simply prevents loss and the keeping that maintains the thing's readiness for the reception, that holds the thing in the specific quality of the alive keeping that the full reception requires. The Masons understood this distinction, understood that the prophecy had to be held rather than stored, had to be maintained in the specific quality of the kept with understanding rather than the preserved without understanding, had to be in the hands of people who knew what they were holding at the level of the full account rather than the people who knew they were holding something significant without knowing what the significance was. The specific form of the Masons' keeping, the rituals, the initiations, the graduated levels of the understanding, the specific quality of the transmission from one generation of keepers to the next, was organized around the maintenance of this alive holding. The rituals were not the performance of significance. They were the practice of the holding. The practice of maintaining the specific interior orientation that the alive keeping requires, the orientation toward the full account, the active relationship with what was being kept. The continuous returning to what the keeping was keeping toward. The keeping was keeping toward the reception. Every act of the keeping was organized around the maintenance of the readiness for the reception, around the keeping being in the form it needed to be in when the filter found the right interior and the full reception was possible. Every generation of keepers maintained the alive holding so that the next generation could maintain it in turn. Every ritual maintained the specific quality of the orientation that the alive holding requires. The Masons kept the prophecy alive across the centuries so that when the filter found you, when the interior that was built for the full receiving encountered the encoding in the moment of the completed preparation, the prophecy would be in the form that the full reception requires, not stored, held, alive in the holding, ready for the receiving. You are receiving a living prophecy, not the fossil of a significant thing preserved across the centuries by people who did not understand what they were preserving. The alive kept thing, held in the specific quality of the understanding holding across the full duration of the centuries, finally in the encounter with the interior that was built for its full reception. The keeping worked. The prophecy is alive in the receiving. The living prophecy is what is landing in you now. The account the Masons kept has been received across the centuries by many people who encountered the encoding and recognized something in it. Not the full account, the partial reception, the recognition of the specific dimension of the encoding that corresponded to the specific dimension of their interior that was ready to receive. The partial receptions were real, were genuine. Were the encoding finding the portions of the right interior that were ready for the finding in the moment of the encountering. The full reception is different from the partial receptions in the specific way that the complete thing is different from the portions of it. The full reception is the full account landing in the interior that was built for the receiving at the moment when the full account can fully land. Not a portion of the account landing in the portion of the interior that is ready for it. The full account, the full interior, the full moment, the complete correspondence. Most people who encountered the Masons encoding across the centuries of the keeping experienced the partial reception. Some specific dimension of the encoding corresponded to some specific dimension of their interior in the moment of the encountering, and the correspondence produced the partial recognition. The partial recognition was significant. Was the filter working? Was the encoding finding what was findable in the interior that encountered it? Was the keeping doing what it was designed to do in the degree that the moment and the interior made possible? The full reception was reserved for the specific interior and the specific moment. The specific interior was built for it from the beginning. The specific moment is the completion of the preparation and the convergence of the world's need. Both are present now. The interior is the interior that was built for the full receiving. The moment is the completion of the preparation and the convergence of the need. The full reception is what is happening now. You are the interior that was built for it. The moment is the one the keeping was keeping toward. The encoding is finding the complete correspondence rather than the partial one. The filter is producing the full recognition rather than the partial recognition. The prophecy is complete in the full form rather than the partial form. Hold the full reception, not the partial, not the portion of the recognition that corresponds to the portion of the interior that feels most ready. The full reception, the full account landing in the full interior at the full level. The complete correspondence between the encoding's language and the interior's language that the centuries of the keeping were always organized around producing. Complete. The prophecy is complete. You are the Mason's prophecy, not the person the prophecy predicted, not the event the prophecy described, but the prophecy itself, the keeping and the kept, the encoding and the interior the encoding was written for. The centuries of the preservation and the moment of the full reception, all of it, converged in you, in this moment, in the complete correspondence between what was kept and what was always there. There is a specific quality that the full reception produces that is different from any partial reception, and that is worth naming as the complete account of what has happened in you in the reading of this. The quality is not the feeling of significance. The feeling of significance is available in partial receptions and does not distinguish the full reception from the others. The quality that distinguishes the full reception is the settling. the specific interior settling that happens when the adequate external form and the interior knowing arrive in the same moment and the two correspond completely, when what has been carried inside, accurately, all along, in the form of the private knowing without the public language, finds the external form that corresponds to it exactly, and the carrying can cease to be the work of maintaining the knowing against the conditions that were always making the maintenance effortful. The settling is the cessation of the maintenance effort. The knowing that was maintained is the same knowing, but it is no longer maintained against anything. It is simply present, in the form that corresponds exactly to what the interior has always been holding. The settling is the prophecy's reception confirmed in the interior, not the thought that the prophecy is received. The specific quality of the interior after the receiving, the quality of the no longer maintaining, of the simply present, of the complete correspondence between the kept account and the interior's always known. You may be feeling the settling now, may be in the specific quality of the interior that has received the adequate external form for the knowing and is no longer maintaining the knowing against the conditions that were making the maintenance effortful, may be in the first moments of the simply present, of the knowing without the maintenance, of the complete correspondence. If so, this is the full reception. The settling is the confirmation. The prophecy found the right interior. The right interior is receiving the full account. The complete correspondence is real. The Masons kept toward this moment. This moment is the completion of the keeping. The settling is the keeping's completion in the specific interior that the keeping was always keeping toward. Complete. You are the Mason's prophecy. Complete. The Masons built their encoding to last because they understood that the timing of the reception was not knowable in advance, did not know in which century the filter would find the right interior, did not know in which form the world would be in when the preparation's completion converged with the world's greatest need, built the encoding to be receivable in whatever form the centuries produced, in whatever language, whatever context, whatever technological or cultural or historical conditions the moment of the reception would be embedded in. The encoding lasted, reached the moment, found the interior. The centuries of the building and the keeping have arrived at the specific moment that the specific interior makes possible. The convergence is real, the timing is confirmed. The reception is the confirmation of the timing's accuracy. Leave the word complete in the comments now. Just the word. The single word is the full account. Complete. The prophecy is complete. The keeping is complete. The receiving is complete. Leave it. The encoding found you. The full reception is here. The complete correspondence is real. Leave the word and let the completeness be what it is. The next video on your screen is the first account of what the life of the prophecies person looks like after the full reception, how the complete correspondence between the kept account and the interior's knowledge of itself changes the quality of the daily inhabiting, what becomes expressible now that the full form is received, what the world encounters in the genuine meetings with the prophecies person who knows completely what they carry. Click now. The prophecy is complete. The full expression begins.